So that's seriously the equipment that I take back and forth from my office to the shed. I gotta figure out a better system here because it's getting ridiculous. So I'm using my vlogging type camera here. I don't use this as my main camera, which I could, but it's a Sony a6300. The battery life on it is not very good, so that's really my only reason for kind of using my other setup and what I do with it. But I thought for those of you interested, as we're getting ready for the season here, I thought maybe sort of a behind the scenes look of what I do with my cameras and how all that goes down. During the season, I'd like to do one where I'm out working more in the yard and explaining sort of my thinking on what I do when I make these videos. But for now, I thought some of you have asked me, what do I do for cameras? Sort of a behind the scenes thing would be cool. These are my camera bags, so I have everything in there that I need. Down here, got a bag. I'll show you in a second. That bag right there is all of my audio equipment for sort of an audio setup when I'm using a microphone, which today I'm going to film sort of a podcast style video here in a second. And then actually here I'm using a mic stand for this little light. This is a RGB light. It's kind of cool. You can change whatever color you want it to be. So any of the colors, and then I use that as sort of a side light or a backlight, or sometimes even as the main light if I change it to a white color. Now I've also got another lighting setup that I really like. It's a huge light dome that you would use sort of, if you've ever taken professional photos, you've seen sort of those light domes before. The problem with it is I don't like transporting it back and forth to my shed because it's huge. It's a big pain in the butt to move around, but the soft light that you get out of it whenever I'm filming up in my office and you see sort of a lighting setup like my podcast last year that I did, that was the light dome that I was using, and I really like that, but it's not easy to transport. So that little RGB light I've been using more and more, and I have this thing right here, which is a little diffuser, and also this will sort of direct the light more if I need it as well. So these two together, sort of my setup if I'm using that little tiny RGB. This little thing right here has been my main camera for I think 3 years now, really ever since I switched from using a cell phone at the beginning of the channel. So this is extremely affordable. As you can see, it's small, very portable. I think it's like $500, somewhere around there. And really the only downsides to it are that in this day and age, everyone is used to autofocus. The autofocus on this is not very good, so I've never used it really. And I've sort of trained myself now, as most video shooters do, to use manual focus. Now it takes more time, it's not as fast, and this camera that I'm actually filming on right now is pretty good at autofocus. That's why I can sort of point it at myself and it sort of grabs focus and all that. That is super nice to have, but I've gotten used to this setup. This also is an extreme wide angle lens on here that I really like. Usually with wide angle lenses, you'll see something like a GoPro that has that sort of distortion on the edge where it sort of looks warped on the edges. This one, very, very minimal on this one, and I really like that setup. So this is what's called a micro four thirds camera. That's just how big the sensor size is, and so there's not as much depth of field, not as good in low light. That's kind of how they all work, but I've had such good luck with this thing that if anyone wants to sort of learn video for a very affordable price, I'd go with this bad boy right there. This is the big guy that I just got. So I've always wanted a full frame camera, since again, sensor size, it's just a bigger sensor. You get more depth of field, better low light typically. It has a certain feel to the image. I don't really know how to explain it other than that. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but it does. Like Micro Four Thirds has a feel. This that I'm filming on right now is in Super 35 mode, which is what a lot of movie sensors were like for a long time. And then this is full frame, so if you think of a full frame camera, most professional photographers would be using a full frame camera. I've always wanted one for video, so finally last fall I did tons and tons of research. It's a problem that I have before I buy anything, and this is what I came up with. Again, not really the best autofocus system, and it's very, very expensive, so a lot of people are saying, why would you ever buy that? It's too expensive for not even having good autofocus. True, but again, I've trained myself to sort of want to make sure I know where the focus is in video, so I set it up, I manually set the focus. I know that whatever I'm going to be filming is not going to go in and out of focus and all that stuff. It's not as good for vlogging or sort of filming yourself because you have to grab your own focus on yourself. Still not a huge deal, but this is the Panasonic S1H, and it's a beast of a camera. With the lens on here, we're weighing in at close to 5 pounds. It's not exactly a travel around all day long type of camera, but for what I'm doing and trying to get into more, which is the filmmaking side of all this video work that I do, really enjoy this thing, and I'm just sort of scratching the surface now on what it's all capable of doing. This thing does shoot 6K. Most people don't really need that at this point. File sizes are pretty crazy, but love this thing. Can't wait to get more into it this year. Then I'll quickly touch on a couple more things. My main microphone is on the camera that I'm using, but this is sort of a replica of it. I use the Rode Video Micro. Nearly everybody that's doing this sort of videoing yourself type of thing uses those or something similar because it doesn't need any power, there's no batteries, and it just works well. So this is a clone. I use this just on my other camera when I'm just to kind of capture better audio, but if I'm going to be doing speaking, I usually switch to the Rode. That's sort of the setup there. I'll quickly show you a couple lenses that I have. On that S1H that you saw, I'm using a 24-105 f4. I'd like to get something faster. I haven't even opened this yet and used it, but this is for my S1H as well. I have an adapter. This is a Canon 50mm. This is the 1.8. It's so cheap. If I want any low light stuff, I will do that. But the couple that I have for the G7, this is the one that came with it. This is a kit lens. It's a 14-42, and on Micro Four Thirds, if you're going to the full frame equivalent, you have to double these numbers. So although this looks pretty wide angle on the 14 side, it's really not because it's a 28. So that's why I had to switch to that wider angle lens. That's a 7.5mm. So double that and you're looking like 15mm on full frame. So this 14-42, it's decent for a kit lens, really not that bad. This lens is one of my favorite lenses really that I have, period. Anytime I do some sort of close-ups on that G7 camera or I want some low light stuff, this thing right here, 25mm 1.7, that's awesome. And then this, not the greatest lens, but if you need any distance, this is a 45-150. It works. It's not the greatest. I use it every once in a while if I really need to zoom in on something in the distance, but most of the time I either have that on there for B-roll. This I used to use for when I was shooting and I didn't have that wide angle, but otherwise it's either that one or the wide angle. So I'm gonna get set up now to do my little question and answer video. This is just an old Behringer simple mixer that I use. Got Sony headphones. For my podcast mic, I'm using a Shure Beta 87A. I've had this for a long time from all of my old music stuff that I was doing back in the day. I use this as my recorder. So this is a Tascam DR40, just a simple little recorder, and you can technically go straight into here, but I found that the preamps in this thing are not all that great. They're kind of noisy, so I use this and then I just send the audio out of that into here just through an input here, and then basically just chords. That's pretty much the deal. So hey, testing 1 2, got a good level there, recording. So welcome everyone to this Shedcast today. That's what I'm calling it. I think this is the second edition of the Shedcast. John Perry and I were out here last year filming the first edition. So just got done with that. I think all of that segment of everything went okay. Now it's time to tear it all down. So I know that was a slightly different video today than I usually make, but sometimes it's fun to try other things. So thanks so much for watching this one. We'll see you next time.